Welcome back to Only Talk Sports, and today we have a video talking about will the Power 5 still exist? Like, comment, subscribe if you like this kind of content. Will the Power 5 still exist? That is the question. All I know is I've been watching college sports for a long time, and the Power 5 is what you always hear when you're talking about teams. If you're a Power 5 school, you're in a big conference. If you're not, then you're a little school in a little conference. The Power 5 is the major schools. Now, it was a little bit more controversial before when I was really little because you had the Big East. The Big East was a conference in football and in basketball, and so it was kind of like you had six conferences. Well, when the Big East dissolved and all their teams started going to the ACC and the Big Ten and the Big 12 and even smaller conferences like the American that was created and the Conference USA, that's where the Power Five really came from. And like somebody said, jokingly said on a show that what I was on the other day, they said that the Power Five was created by a bunch of guys in a boardroom to make it sound cooler. And I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. But the Power Five, it's the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the Pac 12, and the SEC. And that's the way it's been for a decade plus. And everybody knows it is the Power Five. You're either a Power Five team in one of those conferences or you're not. And Notre Dame is the only one in football that's a little bit iffy because they're not in a power league, but they are a power school. And, they're probably maybe eventually going to join a conference or not. We'll see. But they're the only exception. BYU in football every now and then, Boise State, but they're not power teams. It's the Power Five or nothing. But with all this new realignment going on, is the Power Five still going to exist the way we currently see it? You have the ACC, is still a pretty big of a power, but the ACC is lagging behind the Big Ten and the SEC currently. Now that the SEC has added Oklahoma and Texas, and the Big Ten has added USC and UCLA, the ACC is now lagging a little bit behind those two, even though they're still a power league. I mean, in football, you got Clemson and you have Florida State in the past and Miami, but those schools have been down. And you got North Carolina and Duke in basketball and in Virginia, and that props up the ACC, but they're probably the biggest conference outside of the Big Ten and the SEC, and they're still way behind. And you got the Big 12. The Big 12, you got Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12, going to the SEC, and who else is a power team? You have Texas Tech. That's like the third biggest school in Texas. You've got Baylor. You've got Oklahoma State. You do have Kansas in basketball, but that doesn't bring in the revenue like the football does. You got, West Virginia and all that kind of stuff. They're not even close to the level of the ACC and the Big Ten. And then the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is in bad shape because USC and UCLA, the brands of the Pac-12, where the population centers of the Pac-12 is at in LA, they're going to the Big Ten after 2024, and all you're left with is Washington and Oregon and Stanford and Cal and Oregon State and Arizona State. None of those schools are even close to USC and UCLA. Yeah, Oregon's a good team in football, and they got Nike as a brand and all that, but they're not on the same level as the Big Ten and the SEC. So the point is the Big Ten and the SEC going to separate itself from the rest, and will the Power Five still exist? I don't think it's going to exist in the way we currently see it, because anybody in their right mind is going to look at this and say the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac 12 are not on the same level as the Big Ten and the SEC. So calling it a Power 5 conference is kind of not really. It doesn't make sense to call it a Power 5 league when you're not on the same level as the Big Ten and the SEC currently is. I do think they're still going to call it the Power 5. They might try to keep that shtick going as long as they possibly can. They'll continue to call it, the media and the commissioners of these conferences, they're still going to call it the Power 5. But I don't think the Power 5 is going to exist because it can't exist. It's not going to exist, but it's only going to exist in name only. You'll have all these people propping it up and saying, hey, Pac-12 is still a Power 5 league, but it can't be a Power 5 league when your flagship programs are gone. If you did the reverse order and say that the SEC was losing Alabama and Texas A&M and LSU and Florida to the ACC or the Big 12 or any other conference, would you look at the SEC as much of a power league? Yeah, you'd still have Ole Miss, and you'd still have Auburn, and you'd still, well, if Georgia was gone too, and you still had Vanderbilt, but those schools aren't going to prop up the SEC. The same with the Big Ten. If you get rid of Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan State and Wisconsin, the Big Ten's no longer a Power 5 league. You lose that Power 5 status. The Power 5 was supposed to be that all of the conferences were equal, and we already started to see separation when the Pac-12 started to degrade in football. Pac-12 hadn't been good since the mid-2000s, and everybody was like, yeah, the Pac-12 is not a Power 5 league, and it's like, it's not a Power 5 league because it wasn't good on the field, but now it's not a Power 5 league because it's not good on and off the field. That is why USC and UCLA, again, is joining the Big Ten, because the Big Ten is paying them close to $100 million a year in TV rights, where the Pac-12 can only do $20-30 million a year. That's why they left. They're not on the same level, and even if all of these commissioners and all of these media members and all these people are going to say that the Power 5 still exists and that the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the ACC are still a part of it, they can say that all day long, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, because the SEC and the Big Ten is far superior now on and off the field. And nothing in the future is going to change that, because these teams are never going to leave these two conferences to rejoin those conferences, and no team's going to be able to leave unless you had some teams get kicked out of the Big Ten SEC, which I don't think will happen, but they're not going to boost the other conferences. So again, to me, the Power 5 is dead. The Power 5 is not going to be dead in the eyes of all these people, but the Power 5 is unfortunately dead because the other three conferences just are not on the level of the Big Ten and the SEC. I hope you liked this video. Comment down below what you think is going to happen with the Power 5 and whether they're still going to call it that or not. And tell me what you think about the Power 5 anyway, if it ever was a Power 5, because I think there was still separation anyway. Subscribe if you like this kind of content, and I'll see you next time.